Hey, welcome to Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today. We have another amazing show line for y'all. Today, we're going to be talking all about health. We have a special guest today, Catherine Crestani. She has a website you can go visit. It is willowhealing.org. If you're watching us online, I will have a ticker tape in a minute. I forgot to set it, but that's okay. When she does her little talking, I'll kind of ad lib. But first and foremost, we're going to be learning a little bit about all that she does. I mean, as a former allied health professional, she turned to an intuitive healer, a leadership coach, and she founded and scaled successfully multiple businesses. And she also sold them as well. As an experienced mentor to students and professionals in the healing space, she's going to guide us with her amazing story. So first and foremost, Catherine, thank you for your time being on the show, man. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time. So for our audience, kind of talk a little bit about your professional background and what got you started.
Yeah, so I always wanted to help people and weirdly fix people, which became an issue later on. But it just pulled me into a profession of weirdly speech language pathology. So, you know, getting to work with children a lot, and it was really great, but it was never really filling up my cup, and I never understood fully why. And it was only when I started like on a journey and I thought, oh, maybe if I have my own practice and my own company, you know, it'd be fulfilling. No, it still wasn't working. You know, still this constant searching of like, you know, why am I here? What am I doing? This doesn't feel like it's enough. Like it would for a little bit, but they never really scratched the surface. So, you know, I'm always been an overachiever. So, you know, as I went into my first business with a business partner, you know, we built that up, we expanded it. I was really good at identifying gaps in the market. So we ended up with massive waiting lists, and we expanded it to have 8 therapists working for us, which is actually a really big practice in terms of the allied health space in the private sector. And, you know, that relationship wasn't really serving me anymore. And in the meantime, in the back of my mind, I'd actually started my own little practice as well, just for me. And I trust that was intuition saying, this partnership's not going to make it the long haul, right? You're going to need a backup plan. So as I stepped out of that and kept growing my own business, I made a decision to turn it into a company and make it bigger. And I still remember my husband saying, are you sure you want to make this bigger? Because it's going to be more responsibility, more things. And what I hadn't learned from running the business before with a partnership and even going into running this company and growing it was that I made the relationship all rely on me. So instead of building a community of leaders and building others up around me to take their own role and be like a leader in their own right, everything came back to me. And if anyone's building a business that way, it is not healthy. You cannot sustain it long term. And I ended up with chronic stress, adrenal fatigue, heading for an autoimmune disease, panic attacks, insomnia, everything. You know, it just consumed my life. And I went, you know, through a spiritual awakening at that time as well. And I got to this point and I went, I can't do this anymore. And I kept having staff leave in droves of 3. And the first time it was really crushing because I was there trying to pull back for my health. And then I have all these staff leave. So then I had to, you know, recalibrate, get myself back off the floor. I was literally on the floor going, oh my goodness, like it's so hard to find good staff. And then a month later, another 3 left. And so I was like, you know, this is insane. And then, but it wasn't as bad. And then another month later, another 3 resigned and left as well. And at that point I went, these people aren't meant to be in my life anymore. And I'm definitely not meant to be running this company. Like, this is not serving me. It's not worth the stress. It's not worth the drama. And my things that were so important, like my family, I was barely seeing them because I was so busy managing all the fires and everything else that was happening. So I made the decision to sell my company. And I thought, sweet, you know, we'll be fine for a while. I kept working there, so we had an income, but we still had this, you know, extra bit of money. And it just disappeared. And we still, to this day, my husband and I are still not sure where we spent it or where it went, because we weren't living, you know, living the high life. But it was, again, this subconscious programming of my worth and believing I didn't deserve that because I had that program growing up. You have to work hard for your money. And because that money just came to me rather than, even though my like now I'm like, but I worked really hard to sell that company and grow it and everything. I had to live paycheck to paycheck, and actually had to learn how to invest in myself and get really savvy to keep on top of my health. And my husband went into health crisis as well. And so like trying to get myself out of that. And it was only following my intuition and coming to a point where, you know, I invested in myself and got myself a coach, that I actually was like, actually, I'm investing in myself now. I believe in myself. And he helped me rediscover that self-belief and that self-worth. And then I could take that and actually started attracting clients and attracting money and really shifting how that worked. So the amazing thing in with all that is then I was also developing my intuitive healing gifts, which come in when I do coaching, because I take it from a higher energetic perspective rather than, I'll just go do this.
When you say all the things that you had to go through health-wise, I mean, stress is real. I mean, you want to know what stress feels like, try to build something, try to do something. But all jokes aside, when you think about what you had to actually learn from that, now that you know more than you knew back then, what are some of the things that you took to heart as far as like, wow, okay, this kind of makes sense why I had so much friction on this side of things versus now, well, I know more, I'm better at it right now?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing was learning that I didn't have to do everything myself, you know, because I made that culture in my business, but also, oh, no one else can do it. And it was like that lack of trust that I could rely on other people. But if you come with the right mindset and energy, you attract those people, the right people to you. You have to learn to trust that too. When we're humans, we're not meant to do everything ourselves. We're meant to connect and collaborate and network and outsource, you know. And the biggest thing I've learned even now is, because I'm on this new journey, even writing my books and things, I realized how much I hate editing and how much it sucked all my energy. Whereas the old me would have just put up with that and done it anyway. Whereas the new me went, stuff that. I'm going to find an editor to actually edit my book so I don't have to do that. And I can focus on the component I do love and outsource what I don't. So that was like the biggest lesson through all of that, was it doesn't have to all, like, you are the centerpiece of your life, but at the same time, if you're doing things that suck your energy and your soul all the time, you're not going to be in a really good mindset or an energy place. And then you do get to that burnout place, right? Even if you're doing something you love, if you're still doing all these things that take away your energy and your creativity and letting you be in your space, you just end up in burnout.
And speaking of burnout, that's something that happens a lot from those who are at the very top and those who are at the front line. I don't think it picks and chooses. It's like, hey, if you're doing something of value, here's a little life test and see how you deal with it. How have you been able to navigate those tough areas in life where it's like, man, this thing is testing me, and if I lock in or relax or do something, refresh, it might be the end of it, man.
Yeah, and I guess it's the biggest part of my journey, especially like the last year, has been learning to learn my triggers and my wounds. And, you know, burnout is when you're sick of the exhaustion, you're just sick of everything. So there's a difference between exhausted, because, you know, when you're really passionate and in the zone, you just find all this extra energy and you actually have to pull yourself back and go, actually, I need sleep as well. I'm still a human. You know, as much as we don't want to be and keep alive with coffee or whatever it might be, you know, we still need sleep to reset, to keep our health on top. And, you know, that's the biggest thing with burnout, is when you ignore your health and put it to the side, you are going to end up in burnout, because you're not looking after your body, which is the vessel that you need to get things done. And, you know, as you're going towards that burnout, once you start to learn your triggers and where there's signs, and you really start to listen to your body going, oh, okay, maybe I do need an extra bit of sleep. Maybe I should rearrange those meetings to get that extra bit of downtime. And through that feedback from your own body and listening to yourself, rather than keep pushing, because that's when you get to burnout. When you push over your threshold to the point that your body's like, I can't cope with this anymore. The cortisol's running the show, and this is not a way to be living your life, you know. And it's like any emotion. I think of burnout as like, anger. Like if you keep suppressing anger, it's just going to erupt like a volcano. Burnout's the same thing. If you keep pushing your exhaustion and you're just sick of everything and you keep pushing and pushing, it's just going to come back at you. And then you get really unwell or you end up in tragedy or however. The universe, if you need to have a break, the universe will make you have a break. So whatever way it looks like. And being really coming back. So for me, like my big driving forces is my family, my health, and then, leadership, because it's through leading through others that you can actually have that balance so you don't end up with burnout. And getting to know what your triggers are and your wounds, if you can own them when you're in that really exhausted state and start to recognize all those things coming up, because it's all good saying, let's have a really great mindset. But when you're tired and exhausted, that mindset goes out the window. All the doubts, the negative self-talk, it all comes back. So when you have that, it's like, all right, I know I'm at a state now where I actually need to rest and I need to recoup because all these negative things are coming up and I'm going to go into burnout after this. So once you learn from that, then, you can get more control back. But if you're going to keep doing the same thing again and again, well, that's just not learning really.
Yeah. Once again, listen on Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest today, Catherine Crestani, leadership coach, author, and speaker. Go to her website, willowhealing.org. We're going to talk a little bit about willowhealing.org and all the resources that you have on that website. But before we do that, I want to touch on the fact earlier you talked about trust issues. I think trust issues are is normal. Whenever you're trying to build something or you're trying to do something, a lot of times, even if you're doing well, you're going to have situations like, man, I don't know, like I'm giving too much away for someone to hold it in their hands. And if something goes wrong, we just play all these scenarios that don't even exist. But from your experience, how were you able to kind of get away from that mindset? Because it's easy. It's really easy to get to.
It's so funny because as soon as you said that, I had this client pop up in mind and so she took over her husband's business and it's a very niche business. But if someone knows too much about it, they could easily just go start that business, right? And then all their work is gone. And we were talking about it and I said, well, do they have to know everything? She goes, what do you mean? I said, couldn't we divide that into two roles where, someone knows that and someone knows that, and then you're not feeling like everyone knows everything? And she's like, oh, yeah, we could definitely do that. So that's one strategy that can work, like actually delegating roles and delegating, hey, I want you to be a leader in this area and this area. But again, if you're leading from your heart and your perspective of like, hey, all right, this is who I am. This is what I want from you, and being really clear on your standards and your values and your non-negotiables, then that can help build that trust as well. Because if you're accountable to yourself, then you can make others accountable too. And when you're really clear on what is important to you, and then when someone else comes into your life or you invite someone in to help you in a role, and you emphasize to them, like, this is what's important, this is what I expect from you, then it often takes away that trust. And if it is broken, then you learn to have a powerful conversation and say, hey, this X, Y, and Z happened. This is how I felt about that. And actually listening to the person's perspective and then coming up with a win-win-win situation. Not just one of you win or the other person wins, but it's the same with a relationship too. Like, we always have our different perspectives. Like, there's the I, you, we 360-degree idea of coaching and things. But, when you're having those conversations, if you can find a way to get the win-win-win and actually really listen, then you can make a big impact. And those trust issues won't become as big as a thing. It's like there's a difference between that trust is like your intuition's like, something's not right here, versus I have to micromanage everything. And that can come from a fear itself, right? That control is that sense of fear of like, oh no, I have to make sure everything's okay. Whereas I so stepped away from that now, and I'm like, we'll be fine. We'll just see what happens. And then we'll go from there.
And speaking of fear, when you think about how you create systems where you can prevent a lot of that fear from actually continuing, because I think natural fear is okay. No one's normal if they wake up in the morning and nothing scares them. I wish I could be that person, because I never met a person who has had zero fear in life. I think a balance of real natural fear is normal, but being paralyzed by fear where you don't actually execute and make decisions, having an indecision mind, a state of mind, is dangerous.
Analysis paralysis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because if you're scared, you're normally on the right path, because our brain is just trying to keep us safe. And if you're walking unknown territory and creating new things, you will naturally have fear. But the difference is it a fear of my safety, or is it a fear of just the unknown? And learning to get courage, and courage is a skill that's learned. It's not just something you can have, and taking one small step. And it might be, I've got this idea, I'm just going to test it. And to not be afraid of failing, because failing and setbacks are all there for us to learn from, to keep moving forward. So yeah, you might put something out into the world and it didn't work, and you get the feedback from that and go, okay, what can I do next? And that is what defines people who are successful and people who aren't, because the people who are successful have had so many failures before they get there. Like, I heard this really cool quote the other week that Thomas Edison had over 1,000 patents, but the only one that was successful was the light bulb. So, and that's what everyone knows him for. So when we keep that in perspective and we keep that idea, the fear is just there because it's unknown. And if you're not sure if it's a safety thing, just take a little step and put your toes in the water and then see what happens, and worst case, oh, that didn't feel too bad. Let's push that a bit further and push that a little bit further, because it's good to have a little bit of stress. It's when it gets unchecked and gets that massive level of it's running your life and running all your decisions, that's when that fear and that paralysis comes in, where it's like, I can't actually move because my system's so overloaded. I'm still stuck in that fight, flight, freeze, survival mode, and I need to find a way to get out of that.
Well, you mentioned how you were in a position where you had to address your health. You and your husband, you mentioned earlier that you had to address your health. I feel like a lot of times lack of maintenance, it catches up with us, and if we're not careful, we wake up one day and it's like, whoa, I'm not feeling good at all. And if I don't do something right now, it can get pretty bad. So when you had to begin that journey of addressing the needs of your health to get better, what were some of the steps that you had to take? Because obviously they had to been different actions prior to what you were doing.
Yeah. So I've always been like alternative health methods. So when I was at the peak of my stress in running my company and even in my business partnership, I was seeing my naturopath like every week, and I would come back with like a shopping bag, if not a box of supplements and things, basically keeping me alive. And I that's how bad it was, because I was taking like these natural supplements to help with my stress, to help with my anxiety. Like, I was on so many different things. And the full circle of that is when I took that stress away. And even I just interviewed someone this morning, and he said, often people come in, he was an acupuncturist, and I tell them, actually, your job's the problem. You have to actually leave your job to recoup your thing, because when we set up these lifestyles for ourselves that aren't conduit to our health, it's never going to change if you can't take yourself out of that situation. So, that was the biggest reflection for me. But when you step out of the crises, then everything else comes to the surface. And that is when you start to do the work to recover your health. And that is when you need to invest in your health. Or even if you're in an okay state because you've recovered and you don't want to go back there, that is the absolute best time to be doing all the work. Because when you're not in a state of crises, you can then actually keep improving your health to a point that if it does come up again, or those stressful situations re-arise for whatever reason, you already have the tools in place to deal with that. So your body's in a much better starting state than from up here. It might be here, so you can cope with it a little bit. But when you're already up here and try and get higher, it's going to collapse on itself. So, for me, I I found a really good team. So I have a really good support team of people I can go to for my health. Like I have a really amazing massage therapist, an acupuncturist, a chiro, a naturopath, a homeopath. I have a range of people, and I just trust intuitively who I feel pulled to go to when my body doesn't feel right. And really listening to my body has been such a big changing thing in my life, because our body will give us feedback when something isn't aligned with it. So any pain you keep having and ignoring, it's probably worth investigating, because the more you ignore it, the more the volume button will keep getting turned up on it.
It's funny you say that, because what you're saying is parallel to a lot of things with how we are working, our brand and just our daily life, because that feedback, that's important, because we get it all the time. And if we're not paying attention, it's almost like just sweeping dirt underneath the rug.
Exactly.
It's just going to pile up and it's going to start falling out. And I feel like that's what happens if we just keep ignoring the warning signs. It's like, oh, well, if I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay. That only works so far. And eventually it's going to become an emergency where it's like, hey, I've been giving some signals, but you kept missing these exits, and now you're going to have to do a U-turn, and you're going to have to go back to the point where you've been neglecting. Kind of touch on that for the audience, like finding the cause of certain things, because sometimes we want to just be like, it'll just get better.
Band-aid approach. Yeah. And it's funny, my husband, he works, like he drives, helps out with like deliveries and driving trucks. And he was saying to the owner, he said, you're so good at like putting all this money into buying new vehicles, but there's less money in doing maintenance than when the vehicle breaks down, right? So do the maintenance rather than the repairs. There's more money to be saved, and time to be saved, and energy to be saved if you do the maintenance and you do the work all the time, rather than waiting for something to break down. And then all of a sudden you have this disaster you have to deal with. And then, think about it, if from a truck point of view, like if the truck breaks down, then you can't make the deliveries to make the money, and then you're down a vehicle, and then it has all these other repercussion effects. Whereas if you just would have done that maintenance in the meantime, you wouldn't have had that problem like long term.
Before we close, you have a website that people can see on the ticker tape, but if you're listening to us online or radio podcast, you can go to our website, willowhealing.org. Tell us a little bit about your organization. I know you mentioned a little bit teaser in the beginning, but list some of the resources you have available.
Yeah, so on my website, I have a lot of free resources. So if anyone wants to get in touch with some just basic healing practices for themselves, or they're curious about spirituality, you just have to sign up with your email. Just so I don't like having anybody willy-nilly, because there's a community forum too you can interact with, where we post books and things that we might have noticed. And then on there too, there's my coaching offerings, a link to my podcast, which is Willow Healing Matters, to my Substack, which I write newsletters for, and then there's links to get to my Instagram and my social pages as well. And there's information about a retreat I'm running for businesses as well. So it's a soul business retreat, because if we don't work on us, then it reflects in our business.
And for someone who's listening and they want more information about that, is there more info how they can be a part of that, and is it a cost and all that? What are some of the details on that event retreat?
Yeah, so everything's on the website. You can check it out. So there's going to be, actually, my coach is coming out. He's going to be running personal philosophy, which is tapping into your joy and purpose to turn it into profit. So really, really powerful. There's going to be yoga, breath work, guided meditations, burning things because there's going to be a big fire, just lots of different elements, really nourishing food, because it's about nourishing your body, your mind, and your soul, which is essentially your business. So there's all those aspects. And it's going to be held in place in Australia called Byron Bay, which is like really, really beautiful, on an organic farm with magnesium pool and all the things you could need. So again, if you go on the website, it's right at the top. You can click on it. It will take you to the link to the prices, to the brochure, to the booking form. And if you book before the end of April, there's an early bird 10% discount too.
When you talk about the event, where it's taking place and kind of got into nature, that could be another 30 minute of a show. But we won't go that deep in that. But just real fast, when it comes to the wisdom of nature, as a teacher, what are some of the things that you've been able to discover and appreciate from the perspective of looking through the lens of nature?
You're right. This could be a whole different topic. The biggest thing is just stillness. For me, like going out and sitting under a tree and just being really still and listening. So nature has all these beautiful cycles, and we're cyclical beings ourselves. And when we learn to listen to when we need to rest and when we need to go, we've been so conditioned to go all the time. We actually forget we need to rest. And, it's not your paid vacation for 2 weeks, for a year, or whatever it might be. It's actually, we're in cycles. Our body goes up and down like this, and we need to learn to listen to that. So going out into nature and being really still with it. And if you listen enough, nature will talk back to you. And that's like a whole other topic. But, it's just this magic that nature has. And, trees and plants and rocks, they all carry an energy like we do. And once we connect in with that, we can feel very connected, because we are nature and we come from nature. And if we have that feeling within ourselves and understand that, I feel a lot of environmental issues would shift on the planet too. Because if we're damaging nature, we're damaging ourselves.
Once again, listen on Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to our guest, Catherine Crestani. Go to her website, willowhealing.org. Make sure you get her books, because I'm sure they're available anywhere you get a book online. Amazon.
They're coming soon. Yeah, coming soon. They're getting their final tweaks. But again, if you sign up to our newsletter, you'll know as soon as they come out. Yeah.
We have to get you back on the show, so that way when it drops, we know what to expect real fast. Just in case no one heard you, what's the title of the book that's coming out soon?
Oh, I have a few. So one's a novel. It's called My Virtual Obsession. So it's set kind of like with the dangers of AI almost. It's very, very cool. And then the other one is more of a actual knowledge book. So it's called Pillars for Life, A Guide and Practice to Spiritual Ethics. So that's definitely a hot topic that people don't tend to talk about. So that is getting really worked on really hard, because it needs to be right when it goes out. And then the other book, which is in the works, is called Tree Whispers. So it's a guide to healing and listening to trees. And if anyone has a tree or is curious what message they have, they can always send me their photo and I will see what message comes through, which is really fun and amazing. Yeah.
Once again, been watching us online or listening to us on radio, I'm Refocused Radio. Once again, to you, Catherine, I want to say, like always, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.